right. In this episode, I'm super excited to introduce my guest today. He is a serial entrepreneur, a former product manager, as well as a mentor for Founder Institute and an angel investor. His name is Jetson Tan. Jetson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually met at Tokyo Innovation Base and we had a very brief conversation, but I was like, you know what? I got to get this guy on the podcast because he's got a really interesting story. So I'd love for you to actually share your story with us today. What brought you to Japan and kind of your journey up until now?
It's a long story if you don't mind. So yeah, I'm actually from Malaysia, graduated as a engineer, right? So I came from a computer science background, worked in a couple of tech companies like HP, SAP, and I got an opportunity to do a scholarship to do an MBA. So I moved to the States to San Francisco, completed my MBA there, and then I tried to build a startup in the food tech industry. At the time, I noticed that there was a lot of big food portion sizes that weren't very suitable for the Asian stomach,
Yes.
right? And we got off a pretty good MVP running with a few restaurants in the Bay Area, to make alternative food portions. That grew, but at the same time, we realized, it wasn't very suited to the American community because bigger is better, right?
Yes.
And then very funny thing at that time was also the boom in the tech and startup industry, right? So you saw
Mm.
Uber, you saw Airbnb come up, right? So at that time, Apple and they wanted to look to expand into Asia. So they reached out and I came on board. Right. So I basically helped to create Siri for the South Asian region, right? Particularly in Malaysia and Singapore, and also there was Thailand and Indonesia as well. At that time, I realized, that the tech boom was happening, and in East Asia there was a big boom, right? Especially with Alibaba coming out, right? So
Hmm.
I decided it's a good opportunity to learn Chinese. I took a break
Mm.
and moved to Taiwan to pick up Chinese for a couple of months, right? Then
Oh.
at that time, I felt, hey, this is a whole new world that I haven't seen before. It's actually pretty exciting. So I decided to stay on in Taiwan, build a startup there, moved the startup to Hong Kong. Essentially, was a social media influencer marketing platform that
Okay.
helps to analyze and profile social media influencers based on their content. So we use natural language processing, computer vision, and we can tell what kind of influencer that person is. Is it a travel influencer, food blogger? What product or brand affinities they have? Like they carry an Apple iPhone. They like buying Prada handbags, for example. And we can do this in a matter of minutes rather than having one person evaluate an influencer for 20 or 30 minutes and telling you what kind of influencer that is. So it
Hmm.
was at the perfect timing. Hong Kong was a startup haven at the time, and Alibaba was really investing, right? So they were one of our lead investors, and so it was booming in Southeast Asia, and I went on later to do leave and do consulting for small tech companies and startups in
Mm.
particularly in southern China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and later in Japan. So while I was in Japan, I was uh, doing some advisory for some small startups. I was introduced to a Japanese fintech company that was looking to expand overseas, and they brought me on board to help them with expansion.
Mm.
And as I moved to Japan in 2020 of February, literally COVID started, right? 3 days later, they said, thank you for coming. They closed the borders and I was let go. So,
Wow.
so that was how I started my life in Japan. No Japanese, no idea of how Japan life works. And I think that was part and parcel to do with how I tried to go with the flow, like where I saw the opportunities grow and trying to get in on the thing before a trend kicks off, right?
Hmm.
And so I did product. I helped to restructure the tech organization there. And then a couple years later, a Dutch company, which is my last role, it's a navigations company that helped to build and commercialize the GPS navigation device, right? So my role was to actually work with this organization to bring the whole product into Asia, right? So
Mm,
that's been my role for the past 2 years, and it's been an exciting journey setting up teams and setting up the localization of products in the East Asian and Southeast Asian market. And as of today, I moved on to, building a new startup, right, in investment tech, right. Throughout this whole period of time, I have done some angel investments into some tech companies in Japan and Malaysia,
mm.
particularly in immersion tech, in HR tech. So it's a very exciting journey, to be honest. There's a lot of growth in Japan, and I think there's a lot of new economies that are growing because of the movements of the global economy and how Japan's rearrangement of the ecosystem is happening right now. So that's a little bit of me in a nutshell.
Wow, that is such a long and, pretty exciting career, man. Like you started off obviously in Malaysia, but then went to the States for, school, and then you went to Taiwan to learn Mandarin, but then started a startup there that moved to Hong Kong after, and then you got stuck here in Japan, and then now you're loving it, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
I am. I am. I've been here for almost five coming on 6 years. So I think it's definitely been an eye-opening journey, right? From a very, Japanese ecosystem to how you see so many new talents coming into Japan, a lot of new investments in as the yen is low, it really attracts a lot of foreign investors coming here. And Japan is trying to really, catch up with the rest of the world. So where there's uncertainty, there's always opportunity, right? And I think that's the exciting bit of it, right? Coming here at a time when there's you know a lot of growth, a lot of shift in the ecosystems.
Mm. And you bring an experience from abroad where kind of built companies in more advanced like software development markets. Here in Japan, they've always been known for their hardware, not necessarily for their software, right? So what is the unique challenges that you've experienced here in Japan with regards to, building a tech startup?
Yes, as you mentioned, right? So Japan is very hardware oriented, as you can see. They always will call the state of the art or the country of the future, right? All the way in the 2000s to today, right? They have built things went in a branch of its own, while the rest of the world has started to modernize, but in a different direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that gives you a glimpse of how the future would be or could have been, or even could go towards, right? And you see that it's the architecture, is the hardware that actually makes Japan very efficient, right? And that's the pride of the Japanese technology and product development. Of course, at the same time, you see that software has yet to catch up, right? You can see that in their user experiences, their user interfaces. It's a lot about contextual information, being able to give as much detail as possible. And you find that there are a lot of engineers, especially in traditional Japanese companies, building based on tried and true forms. And that's both, it's a double-edged sword in some ways, right? It's both a pro and a con in itself, where, a lot of software engineers build based on traditional software stack. So they built on C++, they built on very traditional programming frameworks. And so that allows them to build efficiently, but not the most effectively, or you could say efficient as of today's standards, right? That also puts a block in them to catch up to the times when there's new advancements in technology, being able to adopt new programming languages or being able to adopt new technologies that are appearing around the world, right? It's a little
Yep.
bit of a step behind. However, they are able to sustain themselves because they still have the infrastructure. They are still able to function, right? So
Yep.
that results in a very unique way of thinking where it's about don't fix what's not broken, but you can create something that runs in parallel. And I think that's the key thing that for any entrepreneur that wants to come into Japan or anybody who wants to build something in Japan, that you don't actually build something that's off the rails. That's not, overly disruptive in Japan, right? It's about building something that doesn't overly but gives an alternative to what is already existing in their current way of doing things.
Yeah, it's very, very important. This, one of the craziest things I learned about Japan is that they're still using fax machines in
Yeah,
offices,
yeah, that's
which is
very true.
that's a telltale example of, Japan still sticking with what works, right? And then,
Correct,
also they have
correct.
all these things that work in parallel, but still fax machines, man. But yeah, in terms of some of the trends that you're seeing in Japan, like, things that are already in other markets, but are starting to get more popular here. What are some of those things that, you've seen in Japan?
Are you talking about industry or are you talking
Yeah, it could
about
be industries, technologies.
right? So I think in terms of how organizations are prioritizing their movements right now, I see a lot of them going into M&As, right? You see a lot of very old companies or old organizations either shutting down because they're, located all across the country. They're looking to sell, right? So you see a lot of CVCs appear because they are looking to find new directions, right? So a lot of traditional Japanese organizations have hit a plateau in their new product development, right? So you see the likes of Fujifilm, you see Yamaha, a lot of these companies that were, state of the art brands, right? That were selling across the world. Now they're sort of like reinventing themselves. So they invest into companies looking for new directions. They buy up old companies and try to transform them to put them into their ecosystems, right? You see a lot of foreign entities try to disrupt the market at the same time, right? So that's where you start to see a very unique hybrid mix of two very distinct ecosystems, where you have this foreigner charged ecosystem is very English speaking. They're trying to create new tools, new products, right? And you see this very Japanese startup ecosystems, and they run on their own as well. They're trying to adopt new technologies. They're trying to use generative AI in their way of working, right? And I think they will continue to run in parallel and in their own bubbles for the meantime. But I think there will be a point in time where they start to converge, right? Because there is a need to integrate with the rest of the world ecosystem, right? Because Japan is not able to self-sustain as it used to be in the past, right?
No.
So that I think that there will be a shift, but it's not now, but it will eventually come. Yeah.
When you think of that shift where they're converging together, those two bubbles, like you're saying, like
Yeah.
what do you think needs to happen in order for that to take place? Because right now it seems like it's almost impossible. You go to networking events, for example, to meet Japanese people,
Yeah.
and they just don't speak in the language, right? Or they might be too shy to speak to a foreigner, or like there's not enough of those type of mixing events where people can come together and meet each other in a meaningful way. So in your mind, what does that look like at that point once we get to that conversion point?
So I think there are entities that are trying to encourage that, right? And then you also do see more and more companies trying to pick up the English medium as a language, right? You see a lot of Chinese investors coming in and they're trying to set up companies here. So you do see multiple different influences and people trying to pick up each other's languages because I think running on Japanese as a language alone isn't going to self being able to be multilingual and being able to connect with the local ecosystems is what's really going to put the gel together, right?
Mm,
So I feel that it's going to be a natural convergence of how people start to collaborate and do businesses as time continues to run, right? As
mhm.
people get older, it's not going to be sustainable enough any longer to just hold off a foreign influencer, right? Or hold off on any innovation that comes into um, each different industry. So I think mixers like in venture cafes, mixer for example in CIC is a good example of that, right? Where you have local governments being invited. You have, uh, a decent pool of foreign entrepreneurs or investors coming in to actually have a look around and actually participate to some degree, right? And these will continue to grow. And I actually have seen that grow, right? Starting in the early days of COVID, where everything was still online, you still see a lot of distinct separation between the Japanese entities in the mixers and the English speaking entities, but you start to see them starting to communicate more. So I think that's starting to happen. And I think it's partially also due to the Japanese, the younger generation of Japanese who are really keen to pick up a multilingual way of communication to do business or to set something up because the talent in Japan is not enough anymore, right? The current set of technical developers are not able to build based on new technologies, right? And they need to hire these developers, meaning they need to hire more leadership that is able to communicate and work with both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super crucial. You brought up Venture Cafe as well, which is one of the best places to meet people in Tokyo, especially if
Absolutely
you're
agree.
looking to network with both Japanese and foreigners. It's a great one. I know there's a lot going on at TIB where we met, where they're trying to integrate the communities as well. I've also tried to, put together some events where we get both communities together, speaking in English, meeting and learning about different topics. It takes a real community effort, and we just need a lot of people focusing on that because that's what the future is. Actually, I took part in the Antler Accelerator program. Yeah, when I did it, it was the first time that they did it in English here in Japan. So before, the previous two cohorts were only in Japanese. So now, from JP3 onwards, it's all in English. And the goal is to try and get co-founders together, right? Japanese and
Mhm.
foreign co-founders so that they can be more globally minded, right? So what do you think is preventing, other than language, right? What else do you think is preventing a lot of Japanese founders from reaching out to maybe foreign co-founders or going global in that sense? What do you think is preventing them?
I think it's the legacy cultural gaps themselves, right? Because Japanese is not just a, a language itself. It's also the culture that comes behind it, right? The way of communication, the way people express themselves, how they actually indicate their expectations or even try to get buy-ins, right? So when you're trying to build a product, I think in the Western perspective, there are different factors behind it. One is obviously the nuances behind it, how you're actually trying to point something out, right? And then there's the other part where you do need to get the buy-ins to
Mhm.
support that idea, right? And how you go about doing so, right? Also the contextual information when you're doing something, right? So if you notice in Asia, it's really about an ecosystem, how everything interconnects together, right? And Western culture of building products is about giving directness, making it easy to execute a single function. You don't want a big ecosystem. You want to be able to do something precisely and concisely. And that's important to the American or the Western mindsets, right? Whereas here it's about getting enough information to know and make a decision that you believe you are in control of doing, right? So the way of making decisions, the way of having a product built also is different. It's about really being able to come together or actually converge on how you make that decision making process, right? And I think that's a very exciting point, right? Because it's very different right now, but you have seen other Asian countries start to converge in their own ways, right? You see Southeast Asia with the multicultural base that they do have. They built their own ecosystem that's both English and also based on their local cultures. You see
Mhm.
China also catching up to that. They are building their own ecosystems, but they're also you see their local entrepreneurs picking up English, right? English literacy has boomed so much in China. You see them catching up with the rest of the world, being able to sell outwards. So they are able to export but at the same time retain their internal economy. So in the case where sanctions happen, they are still able to self-sustain. And I think that's where I think Japan may go towards as well, being able to have their local economy, but at the same time still be able to connect the rest of the world.
Absolutely, they need to because their population is declining, man, right? We're not going to have enough
Very
people here
fast.
to
Very
have that
true.
number four economy in the world anymore. It's going to go down drastically if they don't start branching out and going abroad. And the world has such an image of Japan, right? Like Japan as a brand has a really high image around the world. And anything that's like quote unquote Japanese is usually highly regarded in terms of quality and sacrifice and effort that's put into it. So I think that they should go abroad because it'll be easier to sell. I think it'll be, Japan kind of sells itself in that sense. So I wanted to talk to you about like the different types of markets that you were in comparison to Japan. Um, and maybe why you're here instead of there. Maybe in
Mhm.
Taiwan, it would be a little bit easier to build a startup and, go global in that sense, or Hong Kong, China, Malaysia. When you compare those type of markets to Japan, I guess what are the main differences and what makes you stay here?
A lot of people ask me this question in different ways, right? They ask me whether about my travels, like, oh, which country do I like the best, right? Or which country has the best startup ecosystem, and what country has the best quality of life. And they all have their pros and cons, right? Let me be very clear. There is no best country in the world. There's which favorite countries do you have, and what do you like about them? So I do have quite a few, right? I mean, starting with Malaysia, where I'm from, I think being multicultural and being a very small space, it's a bit like Japan, where there's a lot of opportunities. There's not too much competition. And there's so much room of growth because it's the central hub of Southeast Asia. You can go left, right, up, down. You can reach Australia as well. So the opportunities are great. However, the challenges are obviously with local policies, right? It's about, are you supporting the startup ecosystem? Are you providing enough grants to help them grow, right? Are
Mhm.
you restricting them in certain ways? So, for example, in Malaysia, there are some protection policies to support the natives, right? So that means natives should have more than 50% ownership of a company, and small nuances of that actually restricts that scalability of a company, right? So a lot of them eventually move to Singapore, and that's what makes Singapore into a natural startup hub, right?
Mhm.
Then you go to America, right? Land of opportunity, right? But at the same time, there's always confusing policies and the division across different states, right? So you can build something in Texas, or you can build something in California, but there are also restrictions. For example, immigration, right? Or being able to source for talent, being able to access investments, right? And so all these have been a very healthy boom back in the early 2010s, right? Where there was a natural growth of startups, and you do see all these unicorns today. But in the in the latest stages, the economy and the policies do not match up. So you don't see that same amount of boom as in the past, right?
Mhm.
And moving Taiwan. Taiwan is a bit like Japan. It's very Japanese in nature due to the past colonization.
Mhm.
And similar to Japan, it was very restricted in startups. There was a lot of local protectionist policies and also the language barriers that prevented Taiwan from being a startup hub, right? So grants were not available. There's a lot of protections against other entities from coming in, similar to how Uber, came in and was turned into a taxi company. The very similar things, right? Then Hong Kong was trying to boom at that time. So going to Hong Kong at that time was a really healthy space, right? There was a lot of investments coming from Hong Kong local entrepreneurs and investors, but there were also those that are coming from China. There was also foreigners investing because it was a global financial hub, right? So it was basically the convergence of every entity in of for investors, right? And
Mhm.
so that made it very attractive, right? But of course, at the same time, Hong Kong having its local political challenges made it tough, right? And then going to China at that time, Shenzhen is the Silicon Valley of China, and was a very exciting one at that fact, right? So um, they implemented a lot of local benefits, like no taxes for the first 5 years for foreigners coming in, so a lot of that local policies encourage growth. So it was this huge boom in tech companies. A lot of them tried to go IPO, but obviously failed because China did not want its money to leave the country, right? So
Mm.
there was a lot of tug of war. We want big growth, but at the same time, you don't want it to all let loose, right? So
Right.
there's a little bit of trying to give the freedom to build things, but at the same time trying not to let it go, right? Then coming into Japan, I think what I like about Japan is it has an infrastructure. It may be a bit like Taiwan back then, where it wasn't very friendly to startups. It was trying to protect its local entities, and I think there's still a lot of people today that still want to protect that. And I think that's the unique nature of a mono-ethnic society where you have a national pride, you have a pride of what you have built today, right? It was through suffering and being able to build all these amazing ecosystems like transportation, technology, and such, right? So that's right to protect and be proud of it, but at the same time that reduces future creativity, right? So you see the newer talents, unlike the talents of Japanese, where they were creating the Walkman, the Discman, they were creating cars and such. That today's way of working is more of an executional form, right? Because education in Japan has transformed into something like a factory model where it's about being able to just take in information without question. So that reduces the modern Japanese way of being able to question something for fear of being put in the spotlight, for fear of being wrong, or for fear of being called out, right? And that has reduced the potential for the local people to be able to build things out of the box or to disrupt an ecosystem, because the present ecosystems that don't mess with it, right? So there's that fear that is lingering. However, at the same time, because they have built to a level of maturity, a lot of people feel there's no need for themselves. They can live a good life. So there's that utopia sense here in Japan where if I don't break the mold, I can live a good life till I retire. So
Hmm.
the need to be able to do something challenging is not present yet in Japan. It's maybe the next generations where you see the depletion of social support, the depletion of maybe infrastructure, where people start to feel the pinch, right? Maybe like has caused my money to be not self-sufficient. I need to start investing. That's the
Hmm.
time when you start to see the local Japanese, the younger generations especially, trying to break out of it, right? Trying to build their own startups. That's why when you go to events, you see more university students looking for alternative internships or alternative jobs. They want to build their own startup, especially the younger women as well, who don't want
Hmm.
to get into that mold of just doing a job, getting married, and then staying on a low salary or not working at all after that,
Hmm.
right?
No.
So I think
Yeah.
that whole ecosystem is shifting, and I think it's a very, very interesting time right
I think that there's also been a huge push for startups in Japan the last couple of
now.
years. When I got
Yeah.
here, it was the first year that they did the Sushi Tech conference. Yeah, they have like these big goals of creating more unicorns in Japan because compared to other countries in the region, Japan almost has none. It's got very few compared to even, South Korea. China
Yeah.
obviously has so many, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's definitely an exciting place to build from, but it does have its challenges much similar to the other places. Absolutely. So I wanted to get in, to what it takes to build a great company. Obviously, you're a founder, a mentor for founders. So what does it take to build a truly exceptional company in your mind?
It's about being able to frame the problem, right? And being able to have a good team, right? So I think there are multi factors to being able to build a really good company, right? You firstly, it's about really knowing what the problem is you're trying to solve and having a vision for it, but at the same time being able to share and receive, like there was this traditional mindset where you don't share your solutions or your ideas because you have the fear of it getting stolen. But the reality of it is you are the only one is investing the time to think about it, right? So by sharing those problems or those solutions, you receive feedback. And whether a person wants to copy it, they're not going to think in the same lines as you are, right? So being able to frame it and actually share it where you receive feedback gives you the opportunity to harden the solution, to improve on that solution, and potentially even get potential investors or potential partners to your company, right? Because at the end of the day, no man is an island, right? So when working with external people or internal people, you should have a really good team. You need to have a pool of people with different skill sets to be able to complement each. You
Hmm.
tend to find sometimes that startups are built out of colleagues who do the same thing or best friends who do exactly the same stuff, right? And you find that you're just supporting each other to build a product or come up with an idea or to raise investment, but you don't have other partners in your company to support the areas that you're weak in, right? So either you could be all tech founders or all non-tech founders, right? So I think it's really being able to find the right people to come together to do so. Right? I
Yeah.
think that's one of the baseline essentials behind building a really good startup.
We that is such an important point that is not talked about enough is the people aspect of it. Everyone wants to solve a big problem. They have this great solution that's going to change the world, but then they don't really
Mhm.
think, how am I going to get people on board with me to on this mission? Because like you said, you can't do it alone, right? You have to have a team in order to do it. And that's why Antler doesn't invest in solopreneurs. They want a team. That's one of the requirements to get an investment, right? So, when looking for a co-founder to join us in our journey, right? Where should somebody look for those type things? Because you said, right, you might have a friend that is the same exact kind of like background as you or a colleague, but that's not necessarily the best thing. So, where would one go about finding somebody to join the journey with us?
So I think that's the earlier point that I mentioned, right? Being able to share about it, going to networking events, joining certain activities where you can actually vet your idea against, right? Don't be afraid to talk about it to a random stranger. You might find out that that person is already transitioning between careers to trying to do something else, and it's a very delicate process because finding a co-founder requires a little bit of juggling or a very very thin rope, right? So it's a balance, right? Where that person is either leaving his job or is actually trying to build something on the side, and having the commitment, mutual commitment of and effort to do so is also very important because you need to you need to be able to be in sync with that person, right? Saying, hey, we want to build this, we want to brainstorm ideas. So, yeah, after multiple rounds of conversation, do you really find that that person is a fit or not, right? And
Mm.
also people who may be passionate just at one point in time, but they may be transitioning to something else and they may just drop into your startup. So I
Yeah.
think that's also an important thing for entrepreneurs to realize not everybody is going to stay there forever, right? They may be passionate in this, but they may be more passionate in something else. So there may come a time it's like, hey, I'm very happy to help you, but I'm going to move on to something else. And you have
Hmm.
to be prepared for it. So I think an entrepreneur's journey is learning to understand that there will be people who may come and go. There may be people who stay, and there will be people who will continue to support you externally, right? And all these different um, sources actually help to build your startup, right? And I think that's something we probably don't talk about enough, right? Because there are investors who are really invested. They really want to lend their support, their helping hand, their resources, their networks and such, right? So that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur, in my very honest opinion.
Absolutely. You need to learn the people skills in order to kind of have those conversations at the beginning.
Mhm.
Antler taught us at the beginning to always ask the 50 co-founder questions and understand really, okay, who is going to be in charge of what in the organization and like how much equity you guys going to be splitting up at the beginning. I've heard of too many stories where they haven't had those discussions, and then like as they're starting to get revenue, they start to fight about, potentially equity and like all this type stuff too late in the game, and that's what is one of the number one causes of startup failures is co-founder breakup, right?
Mm.
It's one of the
Very true.
main causes. So I think, being able to have those interpersonal skills is crucial, and it's sometimes very hard to learn. It takes a
It
lot of
is. It
it takes
is.
a lot of ups and downs, right? Did you ever have a situation with a co-founder where it didn't work out that you can share?
Uh, there are multiple, right? Whether they end up on very bad terms or wavy terms is more the reality, right? Because whenever you break up, it's like a breaking up with your partner, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks, right? Because obviously you're going to go separate ways. It could be for personal reasons. It could be because the startup is going in a different direction, or maybe the team feels more efficient going in a different way, right? So there may be a breakup with one partner versus the entire breakup, right? And I think, for example, like one of my startups was really invested in by very traditional investors, and these founders were founded. My uh, were all non-tech founders, right? So I was the only tech founder in my startup, and I think the challenge was being able to implement new technologies into a non-tech company, right? So it's a bit of a David versus Goliath situation, right? Where I needed to prove that by using technology, you can automate certain things versus, trying to do things in a very manual fashion, right? That in itself was challenging, and you have to continue doing it. So it's about hitting milestones and after milestones, but as you reach a certain point, you feel like you have to decide, have you done enough? Do you see attraction, right? Because if there is traction, maybe you can going, right? That you can continue to innovate or to continue building new features, right? But if you start to see a different direction where they say, hey, we've got enough. Now we want to go in a very traditional form. That's a time when you have to really consider, is it maybe a good time to day, be happy with what you've done and move on, right?
Mhm.
I think that was what I encountered in two of the startups I was building, right? That you see that it's okay. You have built something, you've proven, you have built a proof of concept, and it does work to an extent. And that the rest of the organization, the leadership, the investors feel it should be taken in a different direction. I think that's when you start to negotiate and exit, right? It's maybe time to let go. They can take it somewhere else, and you can just try to maintain somewhat cordial relationship. But at the same time, yes, there's a bit of a sting, right? Yeah, like you put in so much effort, you try to do something, and that discussion towards that is the tough part, right? How do you sell your shares? How do you exit? Maybe there's an argument. Maybe you shouldn't even you don't qualify for these shares because maybe it doesn't align with what the company's milestones may be. So
Mhm.
that's where relationships have a potential to get sour. And I think it's all keeping a very stable head when you're getting into those conversations and not losing your cool about it, right? Because for me, I felt like it was trying to be able to value the other experiences that I gained, right?
Mhm.
That I can take away with me rather than just the monetary form of it. And some of those sacrifices were painful, but at the end of the day, when I look back on it, it wasn't a loss.
Yeah, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, man. Honestly.
Exactly, exactly.
Exactly. I just, every single mistake that I've ever made has, I've been able to reflect on it and see from my like from a different perspective actually, like where I could have been better, and also yeah, it's just a learning process, entrepreneurship. I want to
Really.
ask you, as from an investor's perspective, when you're evaluating startup teams and
Mm.
seeing that relationship, right? What are some things that you're looking for in the founders to know, okay, I feel confident investing in them?
I think that's a really good question. I think from a perspective of an investor, it's very hard to see the whole picture, right? Because the entrepreneur now on the other side is trying to paint a beautiful picture of the world
Yes.
they're trying to create, right? So it's about looking through the fluff, right? It's I want to hear what's the real stuff that you have right now, what you're actually building. What's your runway? What's your potential capability as a team of people, right? So I want to know what is the makeup of your team, right? And so for example, there's based in Osaka that I'm investing in where I don't really know the rest of the team. I only get to know of the team through the founder
Hmm.
and I have to request multiple times to have conversations with the rest of the organization. And so I have to make a lot of assumptions here. Like maybe that this founder is able to drive the direction of the company. It's able to influence their co-founders, right? But um, your question about what makes a really good team, again, as I said, is really about that motivation, commitment of time for each partner in the startup because not every partner is fully committed to it time
Mm.
wise, right? They may be getting salaries, they may be getting it from somewhere else. So it's about seeing how they function together, how they communicate together, um, and where do they get their ideas and make their decisions from? Because
Mm.
sometimes some startups work in silos where you have a tech founder working independently. I don't want to get involved in any pitching. I don't want to get involved in any fundraising. I just want to do my own thing. And there are some startups where actually communicate and strategize together. They are able to switch seats once in a while, right, to support
Mm.
each other, right? And I think for those startups where they really are able to be more fluid, I feel they're more investable because they can actually function whenever one member is down, right? They're able to support a startup, right? So I try to look up more for those kind of startups where they really work very well together, they gel very well together, they are able to support each other's weaknesses, but at the same time take over responsibility whenever a resource is unavailable.
That's actually super important that you bring that up because, that's one of the reasons why Antler only invests in, co-founding teams.
Right.
What if something happens to one of the founders, right? Like you need to be able to talk
Hold
to
down the
somebody
fort.
else and understand
Yeah.
what's going on with the business. Anything can happen in life. And I think that if the tech founder understands the business side, he's going to be a more well-rounded founder. Similarly, business founder understanding the tech side. I
Yeah.
just think that, yeah, there's more synergy in that sense. I have seen teams where the tech guy just wants to focus on tech and nothing else. And it seems like it's just another job at that point and not really building something bigger than normal, I think.
Really a good entrepreneur is about being as all-rounder as possible. You're technically a jack of all trades, master of none. That's sort of shifting the way we perceive it, right? In the past it's terrible, it's not very useful. You want to be a master of something, but I think in today's world of being an entrepreneur you really do need to be able to handle multiple different aspects of a company and be able to think of a box whenever situations arise. So I think great entrepreneurs like that, right, being able to see the bigger picture than to say, hey, I've got a really good product that I'm building, but where does it go beyond that? How do you sell it? How do you go to market? If you're just telling me it's a great product, I don't see it there. It's not there.
Yeah.
It's not being sold, right? So I think that there are so many facets to being a really good entrepreneur that um really makes a difference.
You are, doing angel investment, right? You were working for another company as a product manager, and you've also founded companies. Which do you enjoy most?
I think one of the biggest goals in my career is about building new products that create impact, right? I think I write that all across my profiles whenever I talk to someone. And whatever role I take up, whether for corporate or with a startup, it's about the potential opportunities of changing or impacting an ecosystem to for the better, right? So for example, in my last role, it was about bringing the whole navigations and mapping into Asia. And I felt that was a game changer, right? Because you're trying to unify a whole ecosystem for mapping and navigations, right? Where there's only one player, which is Google, right?
Right.
So you want to be able to create competition. You want to be able to create something that is meant for that's able to be adopted and understood, right? Not as a just the only alternative that you have, right? And even in terms of building any startup, that still rings true because I feel you're always trying to solve a problem essentially, and how do you solve that problem? From what uh, incentive or what reason that you want to solve a problem, right? So, for
Mhm.
example, like the new product I'm trying to build now is trying to simplify the way we look at markets, right? It's about how to allow the younger generation uh, to get up to speed with how markets move, right? How to be able to know how to invest in the stock market, because I think that level of education is really not there, right? You pick it up through friends or going for courses and such, but it's really about bringing it up to speed. How do you actually simplify it? And I think if you can create an impact there, you basically have put a dent in that. Similar to how when we built Siri, for Apple, we tried to put a dent in the way we run our lives, right? How we get a personal assistant, right? So everything is about the outcome. And I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to be happy. When you do something, you want to be proud of what you built, what you are doing right now. I'm sure even as yourself, as you run this podcast, the intention is to encourage others to become great product managers, to become great productors, to think out of the box and to have inspiration to do something. And if
Mhm.
that is what your drive is, it creates passion and continuous spirit for innovation. And it's not about the product, it's about what product you're building, it's about what impact you're going to cause from doing whatever you're building.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's having an impact on this world. What else should we be doing? If we're not having an impact, what are we doing? We're consuming and
Exactly.
we're just going through life, going through the motions. And
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. We should be inspiring people and have an impact on this world because we have limited time. So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, man. I agree. Well, Jetson, it's been a really amazing chat with you today. We talked a
Thank
lot
you.
about your journey. We talked a lot about obviously Japan and the startup ecosystem here. What it takes to be a great entrepreneur. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should have talked about?
Oh, wow. I think there's lots, but it's very hard to pin down one. I think it's about being able to really venture into space that are the unknown, right? So a lot of the times media boxes us in, right? So where, if you live in Japan, you get Japanese media. It's American influence, or it's America versus China or America versus Russia, right? If you live in China, you get very opposing media. And so it creates bubbles of perspective. The way I see things is about being able to go into the deep of the other perspective. And that's when you have one side already of a perspective and then capturing the other side. And it gives you a very unique take on things, right? Where you see the reasons people believe in something, the reasons people do something else. And that's a skill that is not really present in today's mindsets, right? Because social media reinforces your perspectives that you started with, right? And I feel that opens a lot of channels, right, to communicating with different entities, right? For example, Japan, you don't talk about Middle East, right? But going into the Middle East, you actually discover there's a whole world of its own as well, and the opportunities are ever present. And being able to tie the multiple different pieces together, you really have the opportunity to build something that is unusual, that's different, and you get so many uh, potential opportunities of getting really amazing partnerships or investors or even product ideas that will not actually, and this is what drives me as a person, being able to go to different places. I love to be in a location for a period of time. And I think it's not about traveling. It's about being able to use the time being there to really know why an ecosystem works in wherever they are. So that's one thing I really wish people would do more, right? Especially for entrepreneurs. Don't be stuck. Don't be stuck in the Japanese conversation. Go out there, talk to Korea, for example. And Korea, when Japan believes they're going through a population crisis, Korea is going through much worse, right? So when you go into Korea, you discover their way of doing business is selling to the world. They don't have
Mhm.
enough local economy to sell to. So that's where you discover maybe Japan has an opportunity to learn something from Korea before
Mhm.
that severe population crisis start selling to the world already, right? And
Mhm.
I think that's one of the examples where you can actually gain so much.
Yeah, I totally agree. As somebody who has also lived in four different countries, like I could like just understanding people from different people's perspective. I think empathy is a great entrepreneurial trait. As you know, entrepreneurs are great dot connectors, right? We connect dots and
Exactly.
see the world in different perspectives. We can come up with creative solutions for problems we didn't even know existed. Only though if we put ourselves in that type of environment, get out of our comfort zone. Because let's be honest, entrepreneurship is uncomfortable, right?
It is.
It's very uncertain, very uncomfortable, but only the most resilient people can get through it and really build something that has impact. So, couldn't agree more,
Absolutely.
man. I really love it. Just a quick question before we get into the last one. What's your next destination after Japan? Is there a next destination? Where would you want to live after this?
I think one thing I've learned is to, you know, go where the wind blows, right? And it's always never to close the door. I think that's one thing I live by is that whenever an opportunity is presented to me, I will keep the door open, right? So that has taken me to most of the world. There's only three continents I haven't yet been to, which is the Arctic, Antarctica, and Africa. Right.
Mhm.
So it's because of these different opportunities and the networks that I've created that I've been to so many different places. And I'm okay going anywhere because I believe it's just a flight away now. It's just taking that step to go into a new fresh zone and coming in with a fresh mind, right? A fresh perspective, and not bringing your old culture or your own mentality to replace theirs, right? And then you once you immerse into it, you discover, hey, there's a whole different mindset you can gain from that. And it's always very cool when you can actually switch as you
Yeah.
go, right? So yeah, I will be in Japan for now, but we'll never know.
I can't wait to follow your journey and see where you're going to go next, if that. But yeah, it's been really great conversation today. We do have a closing tradition on the podcast where the last
Yeah,
guest left a question for you, and you'll leave a question for the next guest. Are you ready for your
sure.
question? All right.
Absolutely.
So, what's the
Yeah.
number one thing that's missing in the Japanese startup ecosystem?
Well, I feel that maybe it's really about having the engagement from different entrepreneurs, right, in the Japanese ecosystem, at least for the Japanese speaking ones, right? Uh, Having what do you call that? Different entrepreneurs from different backgrounds to come in and have conversations with them, because I think where the bubble exists with the Japanese speaking ecosystem, they have a way of thinking, a way of doing things, and I think they need to more of these foreign entrepreneurs or foreign entities to actually engage with them, even though it may require translations, even though it may require some form of additional communication. I feel they need to have more exposure to the way of doing entrepreneurship, right?
Hmm.
This is the way I see for the local Japanese entrepreneurs. And then at least for the whole Japanese ecosystem, I really believe it's about being able to understand how do you gain access to the right investors, right? Because right now, I think the VC industry is still growing. I think the investor industry is still growing. M&A is the main thing right now. And being able to select the right investor is very critical. Not just taking money, but being able to know what kind of investor do you want to work with? What kind of people do you really want to involve in your world,
Hmm.
building your startup?
Yeah, because as startup founders, we see investors giving us money, we're like, yay, but then we don't realize what happens after that. Do they want us to IPO in 3 years? You know what I mean? Are
Hmm.
they going to be on us micromanaging us? Are they, just going to check out and not help us at all or connect us with other investors? So yes, it's very crucial to understand that just because somebody's offering you money doesn't mean you should take it all the time, and you should
That's true.
vet the VCs as well,
Hmm.
because it could be something that ruins your startup. Absolutely.
True, true.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Especially in the world of CVCs, right? Where there's a
Yeah.
lot of CVCs in Japan, right? So
Yes.
you don't want to
So
get trapped into an ecosystem that you're probably not a good fit for.
I heard that, many of the VCs want you to IPO after what, $3 million or something like that, $10 million? That's ridiculous. In America, I think 100 million is the minimum or something like that. Like you need to make a lot of money to IPO in the US. So
True, true,
that's
true.
a very different mindset. But yeah,
Very,
okay.
very different.
All right. Now, Jetson, it's your turn to ask a question for the next guest.
So the next guest, I guess I would probably ask, what do they believe is the right way of building products in Japan in the future, right? Because, as I said up before, it's about building things in parallel. But
Mhm.
how do they build things in parallel? How should they frame the product development mindset to align with the Japanese way of doing things? I think that will be a very critical question for future entrepreneurs who want to get into the Japan market, right? I
Mm,
think that's the biggest pitfall for almost any entrepreneur believing they can just disrupt markets overnight, right? So
right.
I think that will be a really good question, and really I would love to hear, what their thoughts are on being
Awesome.
able to succeed here.
Awesome. Well, it's been a really great discussion today, Jetson. I really appreciate your time sharing all your knowledge and experience with us. It was
Yes,
really a great,
absolutely.
great conversation, and hopefully people will get inspired to build more products and put themselves outside of their comfort zone and get into the unknown. Thank you so much, Jetson, for your
Thank
time.
you so much again.
That's
Thank
a
you.
wrap for this episode of the Product Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps this channel grow. And if you are a product manager or a startup founder who wants to share your story or some of the struggles that you've gone through in your career, then definitely reach out to us. We'd love to have you on. And until next time, happy building, everyone.